Welcome, everybody, to Freelance Writing Direct. I'm your host, Estelle Erasmus, the author of Writing That Gets Noticed, Find Your Voice, Become a Better Storyteller, Get Published, and it is now a course at NYU and an elective towards the journalism certificate. Every week, I speak with novelists, with authors, with writers of every niche to talk about their tips, their tricks, their strategies, and how the sauce is made, including creative advice. I'll talk about essays and articles and share my own experience from 3 decades of publishing. So join me every week and grow your business and build your craft with Freelance Writing Direct. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes, and follow along on Substack, where I share special clips for subscribers only at estelleserasmus.substack.com. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Freelance Writing Direct. I'm your host, Estelle Erasmus, and today I am so excited to have Elissa Bassist with us. She's the author of this wonderful book, Hysterical, and we're going to talk all about it, but I want to tell you a little bit more about Elissa. She's the editor of the Funny Women column on the Rumpus and the author of the award-deserving memoir, Hysterical. As a founding contributor to the Rumpus, she's written cultural and personal criticism since the website launched in 2009. Most recently, her writing appears in her newsletter, Tragedy Plus Time. Elissa teaches humor writing at the New School, the 92nd Y, Lighthouse Writers Workshop, and elsewhere, and she is probably her therapist's favorite. Her next book is Inside Jokes, a comedy and creativity guide for all people, coming in 2026. Welcome, Elissa, to the program.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled.
So I've, of course, heard of you before and heard of you from your work on the Rumpus and heard of you from what Cheryl Strayed, who's been a guest on my program, told you to do, which is write like a motherfucker.
Yeah, I have it as my t-shirt. Right, like a motherfucker.
Love it. I want one like that. But we met in person at the Irma Bombach Writers Workshop. So it was so great to meet you. I sat in one of your sessions, and it was so cool to hear from your mouth what to do in terms of humor writing. And so I'm so happy to have you talking about Hysterical in particular today. So can you give a little synopsis of what Hysterical is about, and then we'll dive into it?
Yes, this is always the hardest question to answer, even though I know everyone is going to ask me, and I worked on the book for 11 years, and I'm still just like, I don't know, man. It's about what it's about. Like, it's hysterical, but it is about every single definition of the word hysterical. So it's about uncontrolled extreme emotion. It is about the derogatory name calling we call women for thinking or feeling or saying anything. It's a medical mystery based on the medical myths we still have about women and their bodies. It is about mass hysteria and how we have all been duped into hating women, hating women's voices, and it's very funny.
I love your bio, an award-deserving memoir. That's funny. You're a funny writer. And in Hysterical, it's your search for your voice. And you start out in a very different place than anybody who knows you today sees you. And one of the things that really struck me when we were at the Irma Bombach Writers Workshop is you said something in class that I think I parroted later on in my session. And you said, I value external validation, so please give it to me. And I was like, yes, yeah. I think that is a great thing to say because it's empowering. It's saying, Yeah, it's okay to give me some praise because in a world where many people are not doing that, we do it for ourselves, sure, but why not get it from other people and validate what we do? So thank you on behalf of me and other writers and writing teachers. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I think where I got that idea was I think it's so important to be a fan and to cultivate a fan's mindset and to have a fan's voice in your head instead of a critic's, because we're surrounded by criticism, we internalize that criticism, and then we use it to silence ourselves, to shut ourselves up, and it's to no benefit. It's not to our benefit. And I just find it so paralyzing, and we just don't need to be like that. I think we can lift each other up. Writing is better collaboratively than competitively. And that's how I run my workshops, where like praise is so important, being nice is so important, validating is so important. We have to lead with that. Otherwise, people shut down, they can't hear the critique, there's nowhere to go if you're not engaging as a fan with their work. And it just feels nice and it's fun. I think it's so much more fun to be nice than to be mean.
I love that. And in your memoir, it's a memoir, but it's also like a cultural commentary because you pull in elements from the news, from society, from research. You quote Joan Didion. I mean, you have so much depth in here in the book that, yes, it's a story about how from between 2016 and 2018, you saw over 20 medical professionals for a variety of mysterious ailments. And, some of the things that people said to you, including a boyfriend, when you were bleeding, he said, "Oh, that's just your period." And you clearly knew that it wasn't. And what doctors, and I'm assuming most of them were male, were saying that it's in your head, that you don't have this, you don't have that, why don't you get new lenses, like not really dialing down or taking you even seriously. And I think that's the crux of what you're talking about here, that women in general very often are not taken seriously, and excavating why that is and how we can change it. And you're somebody who I think has changed it in your experiences.
Yeah, I mean, I had to change it or I was gonna die. And it had gotten to be that extreme. I'm not being dramatic. And we have one of the highest maternal mortality rates in the world because we don't listen to women, because we don't take them seriously. And it's a really big problem. And first of all nonfiction writers, we have to quote Joan Didion. That is just required. So I did my due diligence in doing that. And the book did not start out with research because I'm an only child. So I don't like know how to look outside myself. And that was a big component that was missing in trying to sell the book. And when I was querying agents, that was like a big piece of feedback I was getting, that they needed more of an external world when there's such interiority. So I was like, ugh, fine, like I'll learn how to research. And I ended up loving the research process so much, not only because I was like learning about the world, which was actually very, very depressing, but because I could put my experience in context, where for so long I felt crazy, I felt like it was my fault, that what had happened to me. And in learning how we internalize patriarchy, how we learn to hate the sound of our voice, how we learn to be complicit in our silencing, how we hurt ourselves, I felt released from hating myself, and I felt like I could forgive myself because I was like, oh, I'm not the only one to experience my experiences. There's a reason why I did and said what I did and said. None of us are living in a vacuum. There are all these cultural forces conspiring to make us hate our bodies, to being like afraid. And I wanted to dig deep into those forces. And I think I did a good job. I mean, it was like, I spent years researching, and I was always going back and forth between having not enough research to having too much research, and not trying to lose that narrative, because some of the books I love to read are really fact heavy, evidence-based, but can be a slog to get through because we need the personal story, we need the intimate details, we need both.
Yeah, I totally agree. And to me, something that really elucidates the focus of the book is in the introduction, you say, and I'll quote, "My illness, my hysteria begged me to review how shrinking and muting myself threatened my body, mind, vagina, soul, life. To get better, I'd have to break my own silences and get back the voice that was mine before the world intervened, and then use it again without regret. I hope everyone who reads this will copy me." And then you put in bold cap letters, "But for now, shut up because the book is about to start."
I remember adding that line. Like, I think I was like at my wit's end. Like, it was like at some like late stage in the editing process, the revision process. I'd gone through so many drafts. I just needed to laugh, and I just needed, I was just like, screw it, like type.
What did your editor say? Your editor was like, "Oh, that's an interesting," or it elaborates on your theme, or did they say anything?
She liked it. I mean, I was lucky that I got an editor who really got me and like got my sensibility and my voice and was on board with that, and didn't try to edit me out of my writing. Like, her editing was really like focusing me, and it's editing is a very difficult job. It's such an important job. It's so important to find the editor who helps you be the best writer you can be, because that is really what like the best editors do. So I got lucky, and I encourage everyone to try to find that editor for you, because I've worked with so many editors and agents where I tried to bend to their whims because I wanted them to like me, to accept me. So I was trying to do what they wanted me to do. And that was always just a road to nowhere. And I had to find my way back after trying to write what they wanted me to write. And then I've learned how to push back and how to be like, this isn't working. Like, normalize like breaking up with editors and agents who don't get you, or you grow out of each other, or something like that happens, because there's going to be someone who will. I think it's a lot like dating.
I agree. I definitely agree with that. And you shouldn't try and put yourself into a box to fit someone else, especially voice is so important in writing. And so if somebody's trying to change your voice, that's your essence, that's who you are. Sure, there are editing tips and tricks and ways to craft things. And as an editor, I know that, as an editor, you know that, but voice is very different. To me, the biggest compliment that a student will give me is, "It's my voice on the page, but your voice in my head."
That's so good. Actually, I gotta write that down.
Let's get into how you organize this. So you organized Hysterical. You have different chapters. So you have like medical history, hysterical women, crazy psycho bitch, who gets to speak and why, girls versus boys in conversation, why I didn't say no. That's sad chapter. Emperors Without Clothes, Must See Dead Girl TV, STFU, Silence and Noise, Hysteria Reboot, Speak Again, Reclaiming Women's Voices. How did you decide like where to put the stuff about, the girls versus boys? I know you started with your own medical history because you talked about having it start at the point where it's story, but then how did you decide?
Organization was so difficult for me to crack. It took me years and years. I read so many craft books on organization. I tried so many different ways. My agent said something that really helped me figure it out. She said, write the top 10 scenes of your life if your life were a movie. So I started with those scenes, and all those scenes end up in various points in the book. And I had my own outline that was chronological. And I tell my students, that's a good way to start, but I don't think that's a great way to end, because I like to start at the inciting incident, like the moment of crisis. So that's where I started the book, where it's like, I'm losing my vision and I don't know why. And all the solutions people are offering me are like off the charts, from like, you need a new glasses prescription to you have a brain tumor. But it was good to have like my own internal structure as I was figuring things out. It was also really helpful to get rejected a lot. Like when I was querying agents and sending them the book proposal, one agent, so first, me being sick was not even in the book, because I started writing the book years before I was sick. I got sick. I didn't care about writing the book anymore because I just wanted to survive. Then I realized, oh, wow, the sexism that I'm experiencing in the doctor's office is the same sexism I experienced at work and in school and in my relationships. And it's just different arenas that the same sexism is playing out. And I was also noticing that I was the same, where it was like, I can't speak up here, I can't speak up here, I can't speak up here, I can't speak up here. And the consequences were always really bad. But with the doctor, it was like, no, I could not survive it. So it was like, I actually have to learn how to speak up. So I ended up adding being sick to a book proposal as the last chapter. An agent read it. She was like, this should be the first chapter. I reorganized. I was constantly reorganizing. This is also normalize constantly making a mess, breaking the book apart and trying to put it back together again.
Yeah.
Then another agent said, the agent I have now, she was like, no, this is like the scaffolding of the book, like the frame and what you're going to keep coming back to. And that was so helpful for me. So then
And that's Molly Glick, right? Molly Glick.
Yes, who's a genius.
Yeah.
And I thought she was going to be too famous to represent me, and I worried about that. But she saw what I was trying to do and could help me do it. And that was so important. Like, that's what I needed in an agent, because I needed someone who could help me and who liked what I was already doing. Whereas the agents I had before, the agents I was querying, I just wanted to win them over. And that never worked out for me.
That's great. I love that. So in terms of the book and speaking about the book, is that something that you enjoy doing? Because it rehashes your sometimes not so great history. How does that feel to kind of be pulled there?
So I just gave a craft talk on this about stalking your obsessions and how it's so important, essential to write about your obsessions. And one of the many reasons why is that you are going to have to talk about your book forever. Like, you may be done with it, but it will never be done with you. So you have to be obsessed with what you're writing about so that you really never tire of it. So I am obsessed with every single thing I wrote about. Like, it sustained me in writing about it for so long, and it sustains me now, where I'm not done talking about it, really. Like, I started a newsletter called Hysterical, where I'm writing about the issues as they continue to affect women, because sexism and misogyny aren't over yet. So there's still so much to say. And I keep having thoughts and feelings about it. And like, my friend just texted me about how she's having a scheduled C-section and how it's nice that I don't have an opinion on that. I'm like, I actually care so much about birth. Like, I haven't given birth. I don't plan to give birth, but I really care about women's health, especially for pregnant women, because it's so bad.
Oh, yeah. Been
So
through it. Very difficult, very difficult. I did it once. I'm done, but one and done. My daughter's 15 now. but the memories will never go away.
There are so many things that, like, if men had to do it, it would be so streamlined and so easy. Like, there's this great quote in Veep where Selena Myers is saying, like, if men had to get pregnant, you could get an abortion at an ATM. And it's like, yes, that's how the technology would be.
If they had to get like a mammogram, there's no way they would go to the medieval torture chambers that we are forced to go to.
No way. And it's like, if Elon Musk had to have a period, no way would he care about space. He would be figuring out all of the ways to make these things painless and
Yes.
easy. And it's like, no, but that's not happening. So I will just always be endlessly fascinated by it. And so even if I am sort of done with my health journey, which I'm not, like, health is an everyday thing, physical health, mental health, emotional health, vaginal health, like all of it is something I still care about. And I'm still reminding myself how to take care of myself, reminding myself how to speak up. Like, so many of the topics I talk about in the book, like, those are lessons I have to keep relearning. So it always feels relevant. And even when I'm not as interested in it, I'm still interested in, like, the wider world of it. I'm still so interested in the portrayal and misrepresentation of women in media and how it just seems to be getting worse and not better.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're very involved in the issues still, and it informs your choices of where you publish and what you write. And I want to segue to something very important that you wrote earlier in your career. You were having a really hard time, which is kind of a theme in the genesis of much of your work. And you watched a movie, a horror film called, I'll let you continue,
The Human Centipede. My favorite film of all time. If you don't know what it is, don't learn. Don't Google it. Don't figure it out. I mean, it is what it says it is. I love it so much. Yeah, I loved it because it put my life in perspective, where I was like, oh, I'm really sad about not being able to write a book, but at least I'm not in a human centipede. And that
and
it
the back part.
yeah. And then the Human Centipede franchise has evolved. So there was a sequel, then a third one. So it's a trilogy. They're coming up with a prequel. I'm not the only one who is disgusting and loves this film franchise. And it it just it made me feel that things were not so bad. It really made me laugh at how I took myself too seriously. And I've actually, so I watched it and had such a strong emotional and intellectual reaction to it, which is always a sign that you should write about what you're thinking and feeling. And it started off I was writing about depression and suicidal ideation, and then I added a footnote about the human centipede to this essay. My first agent was like, you have to cut this footnote. And I knew immediately that the footnote was the essay, because I don't always know when I'm right, but I always know when someone else is wrong. And this is why feedback can be so helpful, whether it's positive or negative.
Yes.
It clarifies the direction you want to take. So I rewrote the whole thing to be about the human centipede as a way to talk about life-threatening depression. And I published it on the parisreview.org. And then I have since expanded that essay into like a 10,000 word essay. And I have done research about, like, why are we so attracted to tragedy? Why do Buddhist monks contemplate skeletons and corpses? They do it because it helps them live more mindfully, because they're aware that they're going to die. And I was like, I'm doing what I'm doing for a reason and thinking these feelings. And there's something that happens in the body where when you are afraid, like your body reprioritizes and it just puts you in the present moment. And it got me out of my head, which is like what I needed to do. So I was like, oh, it's actually like horror movies trigger this psychological response that can actually be very healthy. And it's like why we're so into it. So it just, the Human Centipede, the silliest thing on the planet, like led me to some really deep thinking and to some emotional healing.
That's amazing. And in a lot of ways, it was sort of like an objective correlative, right? Because it was this object that represented the emotion that you were feeling and writing about. So it's brilliant. And that was in the Paris Review. And was that before or after you wrote to a certain former guest on my program, Cheryl Strayed, the Dear Sugar column? You wrote to her when you were having just a total breakdown. How bold of you. That's a bold step to take, right?
Okay, first of all, I was about to be 26, so like I had no sense of like what was bold and what was stupid. So I wrote to Cheryl when I was like in the thick of depression. The Human Centipede is what was like sort of rescuing me from that depression. That was became one of my coping mechanisms. So in writing to Cheryl, I was just again in the thick of it. It was supposed to go only into this book we were working on together called Rumpus Women, which was an anthology of essays by women that was going to be for the Rumpus Book Club. And we thought it would be fun to have a collaboration between me as the Funny Women editor and the editor of the book and Dear Sugar, who was Cheryl Strayed, but nobody knew that at the time. So we were like, we'll do this for the book. It had 1,000 print run. So I was like, great, that's easy to be bold. Then Cheryl was like, you know what? I don't have a column for this week. Do you mind if we put it online too? And I was like, sure, nobody reads the internet because like the internet wasn't as big at that time. It's fine. And then it blew up and it
And
was
what year was that? What year?
this was 2009
Okay.
or
The year my daughter was
2010.
born.
Yeah, 15 years ago. Yeah, long time ago. And it was a really hard lesson because it really upset my parents. I felt overexposed. I was like, all of these strangers know about what was essentially like a public suicide note.
Right.
And it, was written by a 25-year-old. So I now can appreciate that that's who wrote it. But for many years, I was like, oh my God, I wish I had said it differently. I wish I had not said this part. I wish I had had more distance from what I was going through. But it is what it is. And I think the power of it is the vulnerability. And so many people relate to it because they have felt that in their feelings and about their writing. So it was like, it's kind of cool that it captured in the heat
Yeah.
breakdown moment.
And it captures a lot of the angst that writers feel because a lot of times we're writing and we don't know where it's going to go or how it's going to, and you're not really supposed to. Although some people differ now and they say you should write to get published. I sort of think in the very early stages, write for yourself and make it as good for yourself and then think about, the larger world. So this happened, you were working with the Rumpus, right? And you're still working with the Rumpus, right? For the funny women's sections column. So talk about some of that and how that evolved. Where did you find them and all that?
So I was working in independent publishing right out of college in 2007. And the guy who started the Rumpus, he was in the independent publishing scene. He wanted to start an online literary magazine. And at the time, that didn't really exist. Where I was working, we were publishing paper literary magazines. That's what everyone was reading and writing for. So this was sort of a new thing. And he recruited me. He was like, do you want to do free work? And I was like, I'm 23, love to do free work. So I started writing blog posts and I had never published anything, and it was really fun to write nonfiction. I always thought that I wanted to write a novel because I read novels, but I was really struggling doing that. It just wasn't my style. And so I learned how to write the kind of stuff I wanted to write. I developed my voice. I was developing an audience. And then I had all along been submitting short humor and satire to this really popular site, and it kept rejecting me. And I was like, I don't get it. And instead of taking it personally, I counted the ratio between writers who are women and writers who are men. And it was overwhelmingly men. It was like a 1-to-4 ratio of women to men. And I was like, it's sexism is why I'm not being published. And it wasn't. The writing was terrible. I'm so thankful that writing was rejected. But it inspired me with my 23-year-old ego to start my own column where I could publish marginalized voices, but mainly myself. So I started this column, and Roxane Gay was in my slush pile. She was the second person I published in the column, and I loved her piece. And it was so much fun to work on the column that I'm still doing it, like however many years later. It's just,
Do you
I love
edit
the
or
internet.
do you assign? Like which
I
is
edit.
both?
I edit. We still have a slush pile. I have an assistant editor who goes through the slush pile, and I also go through it once she's gone through it. And because I like to publish emerging writers and then claim credit for their later fame. That's very
Smart.
fun for me. Yeah. Like editing makes me a better writer. And editing is just, it's very fun to help writers do exactly what they want to do and say what they want to say. So yeah, I'll do it until I can't do it anymore.
And how do you fit in? I mean, what's your writing practice like? So talk about your new book, first of all, and then we'll talk about your writing practice.
First of all, my 26-year-old self who wrote to Sugar and said, I'll never be able to write a book. I can't even believe I'm working on a second book. It's like 2 books, how dare me? But I'm co-writing it, so it's a lot easier and harder in some ways. I'm co-writing it with this genius, Caitlin Kunkel, who is also a humor writing teacher. She focuses on satire and gift books and comedic novels. And I do the other stuff like nonfiction, personal essay, general humor, parody. So we joined forces, and it's called Inside Jokes, a comedy and creativity guide for all writers. And it's a craft book that's a step-by-step guide to write anything funnier. So whether you want to write satire, whether you want to have funnier wedding toasts, whether you want to write for TV, whether you want to punch up your sad memoir and make it funnier, we have every tool, writing exercise, lecture, secret tip that we have learned over our decades of teaching, writing, editing, freelancing, performing. We have interviews with TV writers, film writers, famous people, non-famous people, because we want to just give you every secret and resource we have so that anyone can entertain themselves when they write and entertain their readers. Because people really listen to a joke when they ignore a sob story.
Ah, I like that. People really listen to a joke when they ignore a sob story.
Yeah,
Very cool.
and you can tell them the same information in
Yeah,
a different way that's more entertaining, and you can trick them into listening to you and into understanding you.
very cool. Is the process different than writing your memoir? Because that took 11 years. You have a deadline. This is not going to take 11 years, but it's distilled from your years, your decades. Yeah.
Yes, yes. I've been teaching for years and years and years. So it's easier to write in the sense that this is stuff that I have been talking about and preaching and explaining for so long. And I have all these lectures that I can transform into chapters and infinite handouts that I've given my students that have become like a big basis for the book. And it's all just sort of like at the top of my mind. So it's coming out, and I've also learned how to write a book by writing a book, which is the only way you learn how to write a book. So I now know things that I really struggled with before. And I know that I should write what's easy to write as opposed to force myself to write something that feels impossible. I just always felt like I should do the hard thing. Like that was the impressive thing. That was the challenging thing. That was the artistic thing. And it's like, no, 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 no. Do the thing that flows, that you're excited about, that feels good to write. And that's how the writing is better and you're happier. So I lean into that and lean into making myself laugh, which is also how I got through writing through Hysterical, because there are so many dark spots. And a big trick to me getting through the writing of that was to find the humor in it and to find ways to make myself laugh so that it wasn't such a slog for me and for the reader.
You definitely do that. And you also, your delivery, I mean, you kind of have a deadpan delivery, but that allows the joke to really resonate, I think.
Yeah.
This has been so much fun. I so appreciate talking with you about this. And hopefully the podcast will still be, I mean, the podcast is doing well, but if it's around in 2026, I would love to have you come on and talk about your fabulous comedy book.
Oh, I would love that. Let's do that. And Caitlin will be here with me and we will tell you all of our secrets on how to make you laugh.
Thank you so much, Elissa. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Follow me at estelleserasmus.com on my website and on social media, which is Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at Estelle S. Erasmus. And we're now on YouTube for Freelance Writing Direct. Follow along, and soon everyone will be reading what you're writing.